I'm very pleased to be joined by Martin de Thurah. It's great to see you. Thank you for taking the time to join us and for speaking to us today, Martin. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is, how did you get interested in directing? What was the jumping off point for you in wanting to become a director, and what inspired you to get into the business?
It was a moment in time where I was just working a lot with by myself, and I felt that I needed. I worked as a painter,
Mm-hmm.
and I just felt I needed to have more clarity, and I knew that I had more clarity when I had to explain myself to, my ideas, my process, and a lot of other things. If I was in a dialogue space and had to be clear, then it was better. Okay. And then I felt that I had to be working on projects which included a lot of other people than just me alone painting. So I applied for the film school.
Okay.
That's actually the start. And I also lived in a collective in Copenhagen with some other people who were interested in film, and there was a lot of film life around me, which was kind of fascinating because it was always a group. It was always a group running around.
Is that what sort of attracted you in? Because in my head, at least, being a painter, an artist, is quite a solitary sort of profession or sort of pursuit. You're kind of on your own. You're in your own head, and you're generally sort of in your own space, literally and figuratively. Filmmaking is much more collaborative, generally speaking. Is that part of what sort of appealed to you? Is that collaborative nature?
Yes, it was the collaborative nature, but it was also the responsibility that I had to be very clear. If you were my scriptwriter or if you were my DP, I would have to be very clear to make you understand kind of what direction the boat was heading. And so it was a combination of the two, but it was a team effort. Of course, there's a different responsibility when you're a director.
Yeah. So you went to film school, and then sort of in terms of your career, are the first things that you did music videos? I mean, I've seen a lot of your work recently. I've gone through it, and a lot of the early work seems to be music videos. Is that true? And if so, how did you sort of get into doing music videos?
I actually, because it was, I studied animation directing.
Okay.
Because there were 3 directing departments. So it was animation directing, I just applied for that because I was a painter. So I thought, okay, there's hundreds and hundreds of people applying for the other film direction department. So maybe I would have a chance if it was the other department.
Right. So it wasn't necessarily that you were completely interested in that. Animation wasn't like a kind of thing for you that you really wanted to pursue. You just felt it was the best way into directing. Is that true? Or
no, it was because I came from painting, so animation was it was more like a artistic approach to the image, and also how you compose your world and everything.
Yeah.
It was just a different starting point. But in that sense, I was never particularly interested in animation.
Yeah. Okay.
But before really choosing to dare to direct, I was working for other directors because I was. I worked some years. It took me some years to step out and do my own work.
Okay. And was film school a successful time? Did you feel like interestingly, I suppose, I spoke to someone else about this, and who said that they went to film school, and although it was a perfectly good course and they enjoyed it, actually what they got out of film school more than anything else was meeting other people, like-minded people, and collaborative people. In a similar way that you said, the collaboration was key. So was film school helpful in just kind of a technical aspect of making films, or was it more about meeting the people that you would go on to sort of make films with?
I feel that we had some incredible teachers in the school, but it was like there was a composer Hans Erik Philip, and then there was this writer called Mogens Ruko, and these people were they had an understanding of how to talk about the world through a combination of sound, images, dialogue, where to start a dialogue.
Yeah.
The phone rings. Who's on the other end of the line? You know, it had this kind of very elaborate or delicate way of talking about it. And I think they were really, really inspiring. And it was a whole new world for me because I didn't know so much about film before.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, in fragments, but I didn't know how it really worked.
Yeah.
For me, it was very, very complicated because I always felt that people who made a scene, it was almost like you were just filming a text. So for me, film was more a mystery. I didn't understand how some directors somehow were able to get behind that text, get into creating a world where everything suddenly made sense in a much higher dimension. That was a big mystery to me through film school, how that was possible.
It's interesting. So it was as much a kind of intellectual learning sort of period as it was a kind of technological kind of this is how a camera works, this is how lighting works. It was more about learning sort of the mind space and the head space of how to direct a film and how to sort of get into that. That sort of thought process.
It was, I mean, that was a part of it. Of course, you had a very technical, some technical parts, and we also had there was a lot of time where we had to work on our own projects, which of course also were kind of technical. But I remember it being a very mind-boggling and a very strange time.
Yeah,
but it was it was really fantastic because it opened up a landscape.
Yeah.
It's kind of very hard to grasp.
Yeah.
And I remember being very fascinated with working with mistakes. I was working very concerned about language because I came from painting. So for me, everything was about what is the language in which I formulate something. Like, how do you express a sentence? How do you try to find something that is truthful? And it's not meant to be I'm not saying that it's in words, but it is just as a film. How do you somehow search with your camera, your text, your mind when you direct a scene? How do you search for something that is interesting?
So that's interesting because, talk, this part of the YDA week is about creative freedom, and essentially this conversation is about style and directorial style. So when you went to film school or when you were at film school, and it maybe just after, did you have in your head, this is the sort of director I want to be? I know the style. I mean, as a painter beforehand, I'm assuming you had a sort of certain style. Did you kind of take that approach to painting towards film, or did you kind of go in with a clean slate? How did you approach sort of stylistically being a director, or is that still an evolution, a process of evolution? You're still kind of perfecting your style?
It's a very hard question to answer because for me, the style or whatever it is more, I think it's more a method on, for me, it's more a method on how I search. So the search is always a combination of where do I find the material interesting? So it's a very personal parameter in me, which says where there's a little bird that comes out and says, chirp, chirp. And then this is interesting. Now it's interesting because maybe I don't understand it, or something else happens that I didn't predict, or the material suddenly opens up or something like that. So for me, that is a part of the language. Maybe we call it, instead of style, maybe we call it language.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what the style is, but it somehow I refer it to some pre-conceptualized choices.
Yeah, I
which I
suppose
don't have in that.
language and style
Yeah.
can kind of be interchangeable, can't they? I mean, I suppose when people talk about style, often they mean the kind of visual style, but I suppose language talks more about the entirety of the film, the whole thing, not just what you're looking at, but just what you're feeling
Yeah.
and how you're kind of.
True, because the style also, or what you would say as people's style, it also comes from, it mainly comes from the approach, to, because then that is also a combination of what are you interested in, what kind of people are you interested in, what, how do you photograph? How do I photograph Danny, for example? Do I see a lot of headspace over your head, or how do I? Which kinds of framings am I interested in? So it is really, there's a lot. For me, it's really like a search with everything. I don't have a pre-composed ideas on how each frame will exactly look at all. So I'm never just clear about that.
No. But I suppose, do you think that there are certain elements of filmmaking or certain themes that you return to? Again, sort of looking at a lot of your work in the last couple of weeks, sort of things like magical realism. I know it's, called different things by different people, but that sort of blending of fantasy and reality feels like it's quite a common thread for a lot of your work. So is that something you're aware of when you're kind of thinking about making a film, whether it's a commercial, a music video, or whatever? Is that something that or you just kind of that's where your head goes and you're not necessarily conscious of that, it just comes out in the film?
But I feel it's a combination, but it's more like, I mean, I need a lot of naps throughout. No, I just need to sleep like 5 minutes because I easily get overwhelmed. But also in terms of reality, these cracks into what else we exist of, or whatever it is that exists outside of the structure that we normally are kind of in. Those openings or cracks I find are very interesting and very relevant in many types of work. Or it's kind of there has to be like a little key or a little moment that opens you up in a different way of perceiving or something like that. So I don't know if it is something I have learned from somebody else, or if it's just something that I've always been attracted to. Because I remember in also in the way I idea generate, I just sit and write a lot of automatic writing. I just sit and write and write and write. And then it is just basically letting my brain puke on the page. You cannot stop. You're not allowed to stop yourself, and you just have to let it go. And there's a lot of things that just comes out. Half sentences, whatever. It's very uncensored. So it is fragments of this and that. And all of that is just right under the surface. It's just constantly writing itself a new script and a new idea that happens on so many levels at the same time. So when I start, I always use that as a tool or whatever, empty my brain, and then I can see, a little bit. It's like an imprint of what state I'm in, or whatever, what mood it is. So sometimes it's completely empty. I mean, also.
Really? But so is that how you approach, whether you're working on a music video or a commercial or a short film or something else, is that how you look for that crack in the script or the idea or the track that kind of allows you into it and to sort of come up with those ideas, or to sort of even start thinking about, let's do some automatic writing and see what comes out of it? Is that how you approach a project?
I always do it. I always try to, I always do it. But now you were asking about all of this magic realism or subjective layers or whatever it was.
Well, it's just a lot of blending. Your work is got
a lot of. I know there's a lot of blending, and it is interesting why it's there. But it's something that I find. I just happen to do it all the time without because I feel that it's a lot of the images or a lot of the keys to these moments are maybe fragments from early on in a process.
Yeah.
Maybe it's something I just shoot on the shoot because I'm just interested. I always have lists and lists of ideas, and the idea after the idea. And if we get to shoot this, then I can also shoot this other idea.
Yeah.
And then I have a lot of ridiculous ideas.
Right.
Like little ideas which can be a different approach on how to shoot some celebrity or whatever it is, or shoot an actor, or shoot a swimming pool, or shoot something else.
Yeah.
But it is just, how do I somehow make this with a different attitude than I normally would expect to have, or something like that.
Yeah.
So I always have this list on how to open it up, and that is also maybe it is extreme self-doubt. I don't
Okay.
I don't know what it is, but it is, but in a good way, Danny. It is self-doubt where you say, yeah, maybe I'm not maybe I don't know exactly how to capture this.
Okay.
Therefore, I need different strategies on how to research this. So it's more, I often have that, that attitude.
So giving yourself options, basically.
Yeah, it is because I know, even if I choose a location, I'm not sure how it will exactly work,
Yeah.
Because then it's raining, then it's different, a lot of elements in the real world change. So there's always all these other layers. And then also, these other approaches to a material.
Yeah.
Now we're just still talking about searching in a material or finding something meaningful in whatever you shoot, whatever it is. A chicken running around in a labyrinth of fire or something like that. How do you make these ideas work, or how do you find something of meaning?
Yeah.
It is always a task on the set, but you never know if these ideas you have really work.
But I suppose the interesting thing would be that even though you give yourself all these options and you think about things, obviously it sounds like very, deeply, and you kind of make sure that your approach is the right one. But it still seems to be that a lot of your work has similar language. You're using your word that, you can look at a lot of your work and go, well, that's a film by Martin de Thurah. That looks like a film by Martin de Thurah.
But why is that, Penny? Why is that? What is it?
I don't know. I suppose it's just got a certain, like the reason we're talking to you is because we want to talk to directors who have a certain style and a certain approach to filmmaking and a certain language of film that they use, and how they sort of pull that across from shooting a music video to shooting a commercial to shooting a short film or a feature film or whatever it might be. Yeah. And although obviously not everything you do or any one director do, especially in the commercial industry, is obviously the same, but there are enough touch points in your kind of back catalogue, I suppose, to say, well, there's a resonance between a lot of this stuff. Yeah. And I think the interesting thing that we're trying to examine, and certainly the YDA and Francois, as the president, is keen to examine, is how do you manage, and maybe you don't even realize you do manage, but to go from shooting a music video to a commercial to a short film, and you manage to retain that approach, and is that because that's just the director you for a commercial project it's harder, I suppose, because it's not just you deciding what to shoot for a short film and writing the script and making the film, and even a music video you have a lot more creative freedom, generally speaking. With a commercial project, obviously you have a script, you have a client, you have an agency, but there's still a kind of a directorial touch to it that is sort of often specifically you. And so I guess in a very, very long-winded way, it's are you aware of that? And are you able to do that because people want you to do what you do, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it is. I feel that I think that, of course, I'm the connect. I use myself a lot and my intuition in what I do, and that translates to all media and all formats. I think so. So there's of course, I mean, I get to choose a cast. That is also a specific sensitivity that I have, and who do I find to be interesting to work with. I choose also most of the time the locations, and I choose. Then I also sit with the with the editor, and there's like an endless amount of choices. It's just never ending. There's an endless amount of choices that I do. I mean, I've done them many times, so I have a very strong instinct about what I find interesting. So whatever DP, whatever editor, and all of that, then there is still a lot of these choices. In the room, you know, and then it feels, maybe it translates and feels like it's me or something, because I have a strong, I don't know. I don't know. I feel it's within that realm. And then there's also, to answer your other question, or what you're pointing at, is that of course this is a tip to all who wants to get freedom, if we are talking about freedom in the more commercial and money restricted and angst driven space, where there are clients who of course don't often understand film or what it is. So for them it is very frightening when suddenly somebody wants to film a shoe where you glue a carrot to it or something like that. That is something they don't understand. But I can only speak to my case. It was because I worked so much with these music videos, and there was a lot of language exploration that somehow people got inspired by, who works in the creative business. And then they wanted some of this, whatever it is. They need, there was an aura, there was the sense of language or something you could not define, and they knew that they had to give space for this to exist in. Otherwise it would not be, it wouldn't be interesting. And the way I somehow sneak it in is that I always say that there's an idea, there's some other ideas, and then there's a little drawer in the cabinet with a lot of other ideas that we have to shoot. And they might not, I always tell the client that they might not understand everything we shoot, but there might be a beautiful reason for it. And there's 1,000 examples on things I've shot where they didn't understand it, but somehow I was allowed most of the time, and then it ended up as being the most meaningful part of what we did, because it was a more tactile moment or an abstract conversion of the idea that suddenly opened the idea up, so you suddenly could get into the idea. And I find, so I just sneak it in. And you can also sneak it in if you have 1 hour to shoot something, then you have to use the last 5 minutes of that hour to shoot that strange.
And is that quite instinctive then? Is it so? Is you know, when you go into a project and you're shooting a commercial, do you already know? I know, you know, if I've got time and the client allow it, I'd like to shoot this, or does that happen sort of just instinctively? Something happens. Oh, we should probably do this as well because that might work nicely.
That happens too, of course, because there's always a resonance. You are standing with some actor, and then you can say, start running on the spot, just keep running, and then just start rotating. So you start creating a whirlwind of chaos, and then within, of course, that you can find something. But what I always have a list. I make a list of ideas, like little ideas, different other ways of filming it, for example, or let's make everything red, and then we turn the light on and off, or we confuse our protagonist, or we, that's, so I have this list with every idea, and then I try to shoot that list as well as doing the main idea.
Yeah. That's great. So I want to ask you a bit about you mentioned earlier briefly kind of how shooting a swimming pool, and I'm assuming you're referring to the Under Armour Michael Phelps excuse me, spot, because that is that's an amazing piece of work, and it won a Grand Prix in Cannes, and it was universally lauded. So was that sort of on the script, when you approached it? Was it as it was written? Did you shoot it, or did you have to convince the client, because it's quite a dark, it's quite dark, like literally in terms of the sort of the colors, and also the approach for a sports brand is normally quite bright and quite sort of lively, and that is distinctively not, and it's all the better for it. So how did you approach that?
Yeah, but with this case, it was more a conceptual idea which was already born.
Okay.
We had already born it. It was already given birth to.
Okay.
Beforehand. The conceptual, like, endless swimming pool.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah. But it's interesting, you say, oh, that's a thematic thing, because again, another thing I noticed is quite a lot of nature and landscape and kind of location in a lot of your work. And again, is that something that you're aware of even, or is that just sort of part and parcel of what the story is at the time, and they just all feed in into that story?
What language, landscape are you thinking about?
Well, obviously the short film Color Me's got a lot of landscape. A lot of the commercials you do seem to sort of be set in and amongst nature and just sort of fields or areas of natural beauty. And it, I just wondered whether that is because the story required it and it's purely coincidental, or whether you gravitate towards filming nature or kind of big landscapes.
Of course, nature is very hard to use for any interesting purposes, but of course, sometimes you can find it very useful.
Yeah. So, the short films that you've done, which I love. Young Man Falling is amazing and really sort of impactful. And Color Me, is that called Color Me? The most recent one, I think, that I've seen, is equally as impactful in a completely different. That's interesting, because that is a completely different style. Although it's sort of kind of magical realism in some respects, it's a very different approach to the story. When you're doing a short film, what is that something that sort of gurgitates in your head for a long time, or
No.
Is it like it's just sort of written down in your automatic writing sort of situation?
It's a combination. It is, nothing ever comes out in my brain as a script idea or a film idea. Never. There's never anything that happens when I walk down and buy carrots in the supermarket or toilet paper. Nothing ever comes for free. It's not. It's very annoying. I mean, as I that they just like suddenly distill an idea. I never distill an idea ever. I feel. I mean, I had it once, but it's, I have to sit down and then I work and then I find something through the shrubbery. I really have to decide it and I really have to want it. Because I think my natural instinct is to not want it.
Right. Okay.
Do something else.
Right.
I'd rather chop down a tree or plant a tree or go and swim in the sea or read something or something. So my nature is never naturally to just do this. I mean, I like putting things together. And solving creative things. But it's never, I have to sit down. And then with Young Man Falling, it was a very personal, it was me and a guy called Rune, who sat down. Then we had a pile of paper, and then we wrote all kinds of different memories from our 16, 17, adolescent, that period of time. So we kind of wrote all kinds of complexes and and then we created the script from that sensitivity.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad you mentioned it, because that is also super personal project.
Right.
And it's very authentic, I feel. There's something very pure in that idea.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's brilliantly done, and the acting is fantastic, and it's very, I think any young person can kind of relate to those feelings. Anyone,
yeah,
I suppose, if you've lived to that age and past it, then
yeah,
it feels like it's in part talking about you.
yeah,
But again,
it is. Yeah,
it's that matching of the for in his headspace, it's kind of realistic. It's very gritty. It's quite gritty and dramatic, and then you get
yeah,
the kind of magical realism bits and the kind of
yeah,
his thought process of the things cracking and the world
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
falling apart. It's
yeah,
brilliantly done.
yeah. But that was a very associative. You write down personal matter,
Right.
and you just use yourself. With the Color Me, it was a different. It was two needs. I needed to get back to doing something physical with my hands, so I really wanted to work with silicone.
Right.
So I had to make an excuse. I wanted to learn new computer technologies and then work with silicone. And I also wanted to make something. I wanted to try to make something dark or scary.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had this idea of. I had this feeling that I was attracted to, of falling asleep in a moment where you're not allowed to fall asleep.
Right.
That was the sensitivity I started with. That was kind of the story, and then it was like an ultra low budget production. I mean, for me, it was something I put money in myself,
right.
Because. Yeah, I mean, so it was basically an experiment also from the start.
Yeah.
And yeah. So the process was very personal. Also, building things, a person meeting her own anxiety. That kind of became it. And how can we alter a face? How can we experiment with this? How can we take physical silicone bits that we experiment with different types of penetrations, and how do we make all of this feel tactile and real? And I don't know, it was just one big mix of things. And then we also wanted to work with photogrammetry and how to use that in a meaningful way. How detailed should we be? That was a lot.
It's different.
It was, and then try to make this become a cohesive piece of work. So it was kind of, it became this kind of healing piece for me. It's like there's a calmness to it. In the end. Anyway, but the process was very interesting in that sense. Of me trying to have a team work together. It was quite difficult.
It's interesting, like you're saying that although we've kind of talked about your kind of film language and your approach to film, I get the feeling you don't necessarily think you've got an overarching style that kind of travels through all of your work, which is absolutely fine. But do you think that it's beneficial for directors to have a style, to have a kind of way of approaching things, even from a commercial, and I mean like a kind of earning money sort of process of like be a certain type of director, so that in the commercials industry they can say, well, that's the sort of person that we want and the sort of work they do.
I understand the question.
It's
a very hard question to answer, because if you were David Bowie, you would just be disqualified.
Right.
I don't know.
That's a good answer as any, to be fair.
But it is. I don't know. I think it's probably a combination of pointing towards something that you want in what you do. So you have to manifest that somehow. And then for people to recognize it, because we put things in system, then you probably have to do it a few times. I can see why you want to categorize things to understand it.
Yeah.
I have to say also, as a good insider knowledge about my career, because it also suddenly took off with one music video, but it was for me to just even do more commercial work was almost impossible.
Right.
I was maybe the hardest person to sell.
And why do you think that?
Everybody thought it was so dark, so melancholic. Right. It was like almost undigestible. Right. It was like, okay. how can you take this in?
Yeah.
Really,
but did you find your place though? Because your work, in parts is dark and melancholic. That again, I sort of feel like I'm labouring the point slightly, but that is part of your film language. It feels like, again, not every film is like that. Not every piece of work is like that, but there are touch points through the work that you've done that feel like that, and commercial work as well. I mean, you could argue that the Under Armour is dark and melancholic and dramatic, and that works brilliantly, as is proven by all the awards it won. So do you think sometimes you just have to plow your own furrow and you have to go your own way, and people will kind of adapt to you rather than you having to adapt to what the kind of industry says that you should be?
Yeah, it's very hard to accept that you should adapt anything. But what I can say is an advantage in terms of freedom, again, now returning to freedom, is to really be intuitive about what you want to work with, and make it personal. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess the more you can know that, sometimes you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you're confused about where you feel comfortable or where you find it interesting. But I think a good parameter is probably where you find it most interesting. And that can also be in the most impossible corners of what you do, that you find it, okay, this tickles my mind. I don't understand why it tickles my mind. And it's and then it might be interesting to go there or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds so. Follow, what kind of excites you and interests you, I suppose, is the key. And do you think, I don't know when you sort of first broke through into directing, what, in the early 2000s, mid 2000s? Do you think it's harder now for directors to, become known and carve out a career, despite there being a lot more content out there, a lot more platforms? Is it harder to get noticed because of that, do you think?
No.
I
think it's easier in a way.
Right.
I mean, if you make something very meaningful, Danny, if you go back to your room now and then make this very interesting Danny clay,
right,
you play with some clay and then you make this thing. I don't know. It's you can get it out there. People can see it. There's many platforms where you can be shown, and it's kind of distribution is very easy.
Yeah.
I remember it was very different than when I started, and it's all about I don't know, doing things that you're interested in.
Yeah.
And what you're interested in can be very complex, and then try to, of course, always create the space in what you do where you get to be. I think it's hard. It's really, really hard to follow somebody else's agenda. And then, of course, in that, if we're talking about strictly commercial thing, if you follow only what you think other people want, then you are kind of lost. It's so you have to have the steering beforehand, And of course, it's hard when you start out to have a voice. And it's also hard to have authority to say anything.
Yeah.
Just say, no, I want to film this burning handmade volcano right now. Otherwise, I scream. It's hard to have that, but it takes a moment of just battling.
Yeah.
Feel is kind of gibberish what I say.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, similarly to when I spoke to Nini and Doff, he's saying, you do sometimes have to pick and choose the work you do because it has to fit with what you want to do.
Hmm.
If you want to carve out a successful career and be a certain type of director,
Hmm.
sometimes you have to turn jobs down because you know that you won't be able to do what it is that you do best, and you
Yeah.
might not get that creative freedom that you want, and you might not get it anyway, even if you think you will. But
Hmm.
you have to be selective with your choices
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
to be successful sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to be super selective in everything, and I feel that there's also another key is if you uh, if you feel that the client trusts the agency, if you can feel that on a conference call, then you can feel a little bit safe.
Right. Yeah.
If you feel that there's a lot of anxiety on the conference call, the first call, then you should just hang up.
Right.
No, then you should get out of the room. It's kind of like, okay, then you don't want to be there. Then you get involved in a
Top
probably.
director's tip there.
Oh no, no, but you know what I mean.
I
It's
know,
more
yeah,
like
I know, I
because
know.
because there is the relationship that the agency, if they somehow have a voice and have some visions that they believe in, then they have expressed them to their client,
Yeah.
who might be doing some milk or robotic cars or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then there's a dialogue between them, and there's also a trust, and there's a dialogue, and then you know that there's a space for you to work within. So and a lot of times there's not this kind of calmness.
Yeah.
So in order to have creative freedom, there needs to be a calm line between the
Yeah.
agency and client,
Yeah.
of course. Otherwise, they cannot stand up for you or fight on your side.
Sure. Sure. No, that makes
Yeah.
sense. And look, let me ask you. I know I've kept you for longer than I'm sure I should have. So, just a final thing is like, what's next for you? I mean, you've obviously been working in commercials for a long while. You've been short films. Are there any other projects we should be looking out for? Have you directed or are planning to direct a feature film, or want to even direct a feature film, or more shorts on the way?
It's a very brilliant questions. Yeah, I've written I've written several feature films,
Uh-huh.
and I mean, I was at a meeting Friday about one of them.
Uh-huh.
I actually didn't write, but I'm helping reshape it. Uh, but I did an exhibition at the National Museum,
Yeah.
which opened Friday, which
Yeah.
was like but that's more like an exhibition. That's where there's a big film installation as a part of the exhibition.
Okay.
It was quite a big thing, and
Okay.
it's quite
Can you tell us a bit more about what that's about and what your
yeah.
involvement
But that is, I mean, that's about it's what do you call it? What do you call it when you have to go to the army? That you have this duty.
conscription.
Inscription?
Conscription.
Conscription.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of you have a duty. I felt I had a duty to work for the National Museum to
Okay.
talk about our cultural heritage.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a duty that I did this, but it turned out really well.
Oh,
But
good.
it is a film about some Vikings who
Okay.
plundered their way to all the way to Egypt
Wow.
in 960.
Oh, okay.
So it's a very long time ago. So this is a voyage that was really well described by all kinds of Arabian sources, monks along the way, and
Okay.
all kinds of people wrote
Wow.
about it. So they know know about it, and it was a it was, I think it was the longest Viking voyage that we know of. So that's all. And then we just tried to make this into an experience.
Wow. And is that something that people would have to go to the Danish National Museum to experience, I'm assuming, rather it's not sort of something they can see anywhere else? Not yet, anyway.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, it is. And it will be on for 3 years, this
Oh,
exhibition.
okay. Oh, plenty of time then. to get over to.
You have like 3 years left.
Yeah, just to get over to Denmark at some point to see that. That sounds great.
Yeah, and then now we are transforming a book into a TV series. So that is
okay,
something different.
Oh wow, that's amazing. And how far away is that from being realised? Is that sort of, you're in the thick of that at the moment, are you?
Yeah, we started yesterday.
Oh right, okay. You're right at the beginning.
Yeah, we're at the beginning. Yeah.
That sounds great. And look, so finishing up, I guess one last question is, to put you on the spot slightly, is for all the new directors that are watching this and the aspiring directors that want to have a long and successful career as a director, be it in advertising or elsewhere, what sort of tip would you give to them to sort of try and achieve that aim?
Yeah, it's always good with a tip.
Yeah, sorry, I sprung that on you.
No, it's good to have some tips. What's a good tip? There's something. I think that, there's always something in your. I feel like saying something about intuition, but intuition can also be kind of confusing what it is. It's really hard to learn to follow your instinct. I don't know how to get into that, but okay, you can say to anybody that if you don't think you have a story to tell, all these stories that we experience personally in all our lives are valuable iterations, maybe of the same story. So.
Right.
All stories can be relevant, and they are in fact deeply complex.
Right.
That's one thing you can say, but I don't know if that helps to be a successful something. I don't know if it's so successful. I guess is if you try to find out what you find interesting.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess that's the I don't know. That's the only real.
Yeah.
I suppose
success is a very subjective term anyway, isn't it? So it's a difficult question to answer because one person's success is sort of not necessarily the same as another's, but very useful advice nonetheless.
But what do you think, Danny? What tip would you give to people?
Well, I not having been a director before, I feel sort of slightly fraudulent giving anyone a tip about how to be a director, but. Yeah. Of all the directors that I've spoken to over the years, I guess simplistically is get out there and do it is what most people, most directors have said. Is be proactive and make as much as you can, make mistakes. Essentially, I suppose as you could say that for any kind of artistic endeavor is get out there, make stuff, make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, and keep going because. That's the only way you get better, I suppose, is to keep doing. So, yeah, it's sort of a bit trite, but that's what most people have kind of in some way, shape or form told me when I've asked them to impart their wisdom to everybody. Well, I just sit back and now you've asked me, so now I've got to...
Yeah. But it doesn't feel so motivating thinking about that you just should go out there and do it.
It does or doesn't feel motivating?
No, I don't think so, no.
No?
Do you feel it's motivating if somebody says, hey, just go, just do it. Just write your book. Just write a book.
Well, I suppose it's not motivating in this, but I don't know. I suppose different people would find different things motivating, wouldn't they? But I suppose it's a truism as much as a motivation that you have to keep trying these things. If you want to be successful at something, again, the old adage, practice makes perfect. Of getting out there, doing something, doing it as well as you can, but realizing that you've not done it as well as you should, and then trying to do it again. So that feels like that's, and that covers not just filmmaking, that covers any kind of endeavor really. But that certainly seems to be what a lot of people suggest is the way to kind of gain confidence and kind of experience. But maybe it's not the most motivating. I'm not sure you would pin it on your wall as a motivational poster.
True.
So, that's why I'm asking the questions and you're giving the answers, and not the other way around.
No, it's not true. You can also say that iterations can be endless in editing. That's also
Yeah.
no. I think this being a director is such a multidisciplinary. What do you say? How
Disciplinary.
uh, kind of role to have. It's kind of first you have to dare to do it, and then you have to be among other people, and you have to kind of make a good space with other people that you work with. I feel that the community is very important, and it's also important being a director that you live your life when you work with your film. So it's the more personal and more your life you can put into your film work, the better.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't have time to live your life.
Yeah. Okay. Look, that sounds like perfect end point, really. From that. So thank you very much, Martin. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and to hear your story, and for you to impart your words of wisdom, which has been really nice. So thank you so much for taking the time, and yeah, good luck with the TV series.